Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lead Different podcast. I have today, our guest is Dave Durand. He's a best-selling author, a radio personality, and a trainer of well over 150,000 individuals from all walks of life, including sales representatives, CEOs, Fortune 500 executives. Dave doesn't just provide feel-good motivational talks. He inspires his listeners to action with real-world advice for real-world results. He is the CEO of Leading Giants and the executive chairman of Best Version Media, an international media company located in Brookfield, Wisconsin. During his tenure as CEO of Best Version Media, it was among the top 20 fastest growing media companies in North America and the fastest growing private company in Wisconsin of any type. In 2024, the Wall Street Journal recognized Best Version Media as one of the top 100 best and brightest companies to work for in the nation. So this is a great guest that we have today, because one of the things I've heard, and I've been following Dave for a couple of years now, he says, there's a lot of people out there telling us how to do things, but they've never done it. Well, this is a coach, this is a leader that has been there and done that, and that's where a lot of his advice comes from. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Dan. I love the idea of, why not, and lead differently. I mean, if we're not asking those types of questions and finding out more innovative ways to get things done, we're not going to do it. So you're off to a good start here with your program, and I'm grateful to be a guest.
Hey, I see the golf simulator in the background. We talked about it in the pre-show. You've got some construction going on, which, again, it's a sign of growth, right? You're moving into a new building. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, we have our technology isn't entirely set up. It wasn't our old studio, but this is one of those things where you've sometimes construction delays here and there. So we have quite a surrounding here, including some construction taking place, but we'll be fully in. You would look at this and you'd say, okay, this is kind of a man cave, in addition to a bit of a podcast studio, workplace, whatever. And you'd think, wow, Dave must be a really serious golfer if he has this golf simulator. There's two reasons people get golf simulators. One is because they're a serious golfer, and one is because they're so bad they need to improve. I am definitely the second category.
Well, it's good. It's good to know that we have that in common, Dave. I actually played in a golf tournament with my wife yesterday with another couple. We just recently celebrated our 30th anniversary, and the couple we were playing with has been married 43 years. So when you've been married 30 years, there's very few people you meet that have been married longer. But it was a great time. It was a client of mine, and we had a little couples tournament, and it was a scramble. It was a lot of fun. So you're welcome to join us anytime, Dave.
That sounds great. Just keep in mind that most golf courses that I've been on have a rash from every step that I've taken on them. So,
well, you're a former MMA fighter. You know what I love about that background, the man cave stuff? I actually have a gym in my home where I used to be a boxer, so I have a heavy bag, a speed bag, and I've thought about moving my office in there so that it could look really cool, that people would say, hey, look, he's a fighter too. So you've got a background in that. There's so much that I want to make sure we get to, because you've got a really cool background, Dave. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is Leading Giants, your newest venture that you've created. What makes Leading Giants different than all the other leadership programs that are out there? And I know because I've been following you, but if you have a minute, and you do, a minute or two to tell us what's different about Leading Giants than other places that people can go to learn how to lead and scale.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So I've worked with now just in small businesses. My company's signed contracts with over 70,000 small businesses over the past how many years. And so we've watched all sorts of things, like what are their marketing plans, their sales plans, their strategy plans, their financial plans, everything. And so we know small and medium-sized businesses very, very intimately. And yet those aren't really the problems. They're problems. But the biggest problem is that it's the person there and the lack of virtue that they have, the lack of ability to make a decision, the lack of willingness to grow, too much pride. Those are the things that actually create and cause the bad sales strategies, the bad production strategies, the bad HR strategies. If they're stuck in financial turmoil, it's usually tied to who that particular person is. So these things are extensions of the person. In other words, here's another way of looking at it. You could have two equal circumstances where two entrepreneurs have the same access to the same product, technology, market, and even human resources. One of them succeeds and one fails. Why does the one succeed if the tools were all the same for them and the other one failed? It's because of who they are. They were committed to becoming the best version of themselves. They were committed to becoming a high virtue person in order to accomplish really good things. So we do everything. We teach the sales strategies, how to build a sales army, all the online stuff as far as, getting leads and all that kind of stuff. We'll help people find, the financial strategies that they need, how to eliminate waste in order to be more effective in productivity, but also how to form that person into a giant. And you can't lead giants if you aren't a giant. And if you want to build a great organization, you have to have high-powered people in your organization who are giants or becoming giants themselves.
I heard an exchange between you and Nico and talking about developing people, right? Nico's your show producer. And one of the things that a lot of leaders suffer from is they're afraid to put people around them that are better than them at what they do specifically, right? I'm the only one that can do that. So you talk a lot about that. Tell us what's the most important thing. And I think one of the things that you're really hitting on is leadership. I think it's leaders. When you have better leaders, you're going to have better organizations, right? Yeah. So it starts with that internal work. And it sounds like that's where you concentrate on when you go into an organization, building better leaders who want to be the best version of themselves. But I heard that conversation. I thought it was really good. What do leaders need to do when they're building an organization? What's the most important thing they need to look for in the people that they're bringing in?
Yeah, this is a great question because there's two errors that are taking place. They've always taken place, but they've become popularized. One of them is where a person has so much pride, they don't believe anybody can do anything quite like they can. And this traps people who are particularly solopreneurs, but it can trap leaders even in Fortune 500 companies, where they basically think that they're the smartest person in the room all the time and nobody's capable of, outperforming them. There's a reverse side of that. And it's even been popularized in Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power, which was popular 20 some years ago when it came out, but it had a resurgence in a crazy way. It's just kind of, come out there to be, I think, due to some online influence, a popular thing. And the first law there is never outshine the master, basically telling you that your boss will probably be fickle and jealous. And if you perform better than your boss, he's just going to take revenge upon you and you're not going to go anywhere. The reason these are bad errors is because, frankly speaking, I tell people outshine the master all the time. Do it. Here's why. Because you'll know whether or not it's a master worth following. If you're outshining your master and they want to kick you aside or take credit, leave. That person's not worth working for, and you can never become awesome there or fully yourself. So it's a great way to identify whether or not you're following the right person in the first place. And if you are a leader and you don't understand or recognize that it's a feather in your cap, if you're building a great organization with great people who outshine you, I mean, can you imagine, Phil Jackson being jealous of Michael Jordan because he was getting all the attention on the court? No, this doesn't work. So who do you look for? The first thing you look for is a person that has very high virtue, a person who is willing to grind things out and to become better, because you can find people that are technically qualified for things all over the place, but being technically qualified and the right person willing to learn with humility, that's really what it takes.
And you bring up a couple of topics that I really like. Number one of the first leadership books I read was Sacred Hoops that Phil Jackson wrote about his time getting the Bulls. And it's exactly right. How do you manage a Dennis Rodman, Dave? You realize, and I use this all the time, you realize that guy can get rebounds. And you've got the best player in the NBA. And now you have a guy that can get him the ball back half of the time that he misses. How much more confident is Michael Jordan? You put all those pieces together and you get a championship team, and then you let them be who they are, right? You didn't give Dennis Rodman a curfew, and you didn't get mad at him for showing up late for practice, but you made sure he had whatever he needed around him so he could get rebounds and get the ball back to Michael Jordan. So thank you for bringing that great memory up. I love that book. One of the things I was going to ask you that you brought up is technically qualified. And that's one of the issues that I love working with in business. And I think you probably have seen it, Dave. In every industry, we promote people based on competency. And what I mean by that is the best accountant, we make him the leader of the accounting department. The best sales guy will make him the leader of the sales team. And sometimes they're not the best leader. They don't have the best leadership quality. So you brought something that's really important, high virtue. So you have to look for that person sometimes, and you only have to look at, I was in the military also, you look around and you have these, what we call emergent leaders. That's the guy or gal you got to promote to a leadership position because everybody will follow them. They may not have the best sales results. They may not be the best accountant. They may not be the best programmer, but people will follow them. And now you've got a great leader. And so a lot of times in the work that I do, and I'm sure you see it, is you have someone that got promoted because they were the best darn programmer. So now they're leading the IT team and they have no desire to be a leader, but they're in that space. Or they are a CEO. They started a company and they're really good at what they do. But the last thing they wanted to do is have to hire people and manage people, right? So how do we help those people? What's your best advice for a leader who finds himself inadvertently or because they've grown and they've scaled, now they're leading people? What is the first thing they need to do so they can be a better leader?
Well, I think even to back up a little bit, so as to avoid that circumstance as a leader who promotes the wrong leader. Just because somebody's good at accounting or good at sales doesn't mean they're going to be a good leader. It's a really good point. Here, there's a couple of litmus tests that I use before I promote somebody like that. The first one is that just, do you like it type of thing. Now, there are some people who like to lead and they're bad at it and they have such a high ego, they don't realize they're no good at it. But for the most part, if you look at a group of people and you say, hey, we're all going to go skydiving, who wants to go? There's going to be a certain number of people who are like, I'm in. Okay, they're so into it. You can't really convince the others. Maybe a few on the fence, but they're either like, I'm all about that. And there are others going to say, no way, don't want to do it. It's the same thing when it comes to leadership. Hey, I've got a leadership opportunity. Who's in? Some people are going to be like, I'm in. I'll do it. Others are like, not my thing. If they go, not my thing, you should not promote them. Generally, the reason they have a resistance to it is because they recognize it's not their area of expertise. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes there are reluctant leaders who do become great at leadership, but for the most part, it's a good, I use the term litmus test. It's not so much a litmus test as much as it's an indicator. I would use that as an indicator. Now, if you find yourself in a position that you are either not interested in or not good at, and you're working for another organization, I wouldn't stay in it. That would be like if you asked me to sing opera and then you were disappointed with me with how it sounded. Well, it's your fault for asking me to sing it. It's not going to be good. I'm just not qualified and I don't like it. It's a miserable place to stay in, that sort of thing. But if you find yourself to be the CEO or the founder of a business and now it's growing and you have a bigger responsibility, this is actually relatively solvable because you have control of budgets, you have authority, whereas in the other role you may not as an employee someplace else. Why does this matter? Because the bigger you build an organization, the greater your responsibility, but the less your responsibilities. So you can put people between you and the problems that you're facing pretty easily. So let's say you need to rally the troops, but you're not very inspiring. Then you hire somebody inspiring and you tell them exactly what that task is, and you give them the power, the authority, and the resources to inspire. And if they do it, you're all set. You can retain your title as CEO. That person is the president, or you become the executive chairman. They're the CEO. And now it's not that you have to inspire. It's that inspiration needs to be done. Just like as the CEO, you don't have to do the accounting, but the accounting needs to be done. You don't need to do the selling, but the selling needs to be done. So if you put people in those power positions and you give them the resources and the authority to get it done, then that can happen. And sometimes if you're an employee someplace, you don't have the decision-making power to get that done or the budget to get it done. But in your own company, you can.
You said something really important. You greater responsibility, but less responsibilities. And I find that, as I'm starting this new venture, one of the things that I've tried to do is really focus in on what are the things that only I can do, that I do really well, that I want to be the best at. And I think that speaks to that 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your clients give you 80% of your revenue, if we look at the Pareto principle. And so 20% of your activities probably lead to 80% of your productivity. And I hadn't even thought of what you just said. you can hire for inspiration. Just because you're the CEO doesn't mean you have to be the inspirational leader. And a lot of companies will do that. They have somebody that's the face of the organization. So that is just really great advice. Thank you so much for that, Dave. Can we move to, I want to talk to your motto. I love your slay dragons. What does it mean to slay dragons in the big scheme of things? What is it that we're doing when we're going out, when we're leading giants and slaying dragons?
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of came off as a quip, but it was so well received that we adopted it. I just said it one day. I was, kind of rallying the troops to go out there and be bold in business. I said, let's go slay some dragons together. And they just loved it. And that said a lot to me. That said that, and this I knew before, but I just connected the two ideas. People want and should live a life of adventure. When a person stops seeing their life as a story being told, which is adventure, then they stop embracing the challenges that come their way. So here's another way of looking at it. Here's a story that has never been made into a movie, a novel that's never been read. A rich, healthy, young, good-looking person raised by rich, healthy, young, good-looking parents inherits highly profitable business while parents die 1 minute apart, a painless death in bed, and the process is repeated. Boring. There's no adventure in it. There's no antagonist, protagonist. There's no, revenge, betrayal, overcoming, pain. And our life is like that. And if we're in our lowest moment and we realize this is the time when you're watching that story on screen, not that we're living make-believe, but the greatest stories on screen are actually true life tales, right? When you see the hero in the story living their most desperate moment and they have this decision to make, am I going to go out there and slay dragons, or am I going to just walk out there and be slain? And I think it's better that we pick up our sword and we see life as an adventure and that we run toward the fire, not away from it. And that changes the dynamic of, oh, I have to do this today. I have all these competitors today. I have to make my phone calls. I have to secure the financing for the business. I have a negative thing happening within the culture of my organization and I have to repair this. No, instead, you get to go slay dragons. Can you imagine if you were playing pro football and you went into the huddle and you were like, those guys are trying to hurt me. They're trying to tackle me. What are they? I mean, of course they are. That's football. And if they weren't there, you wouldn't even have a team. You couldn't play. You are required to face an opponent in order to play the game. And that's really the way life is. And if we start to embrace it, we start to realize how silly we sound when we complain about most of our problems.
You said something beautiful there, Dave. You get to. You don't have to do anything, right? We don't have to do anything. You get to. If you don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I get to try to get, because this is one of the things that I love you say, do the things that you don't like to do. Do the things that nobody else likes to do. Do the hard things. And that's probably one of the biggest keys to success. And then I think the even better take on it is think of those things as things you get to do versus you have to do. I remember, and I'm going to say this. I sent an email to Dave and I didn't hear back from him. In my my inner voice is saying, oh gosh, he probably thinks I'm just so low on the totem pole, but I said, you know what? Send another email. I know it's hard. And so I sent another email and I said, hey, you might not have read this, but here's why I want you to be on my show. And then that got a response. And you have to do that over and over. You have to beat your that little voice in your head that says, oh, you're just not good enough. He's never going to email you back, because we do that with clients all the time. You got to pick up the phone and just say, hey, when are we moving forward, or are we not moving forward, right? Because then at least you have an answer, and then you can either cross them off your list or add them to your list of people that you're going to be working with. What is that? What does that mean? Because you've said it, but I'd love to hear your take on, hey, do the hard things, do the things that you don't like to do, so that eventually you can do the things you do like to do, right?
Yeah, it's true. Now, I like to get a little philosophical on this and to dig down deep, because it gives people a little bit more hope and a practical sense of this. The saying that I have is, first of all, the key to success is to do what you don't feel like doing. Now, that is different than doing the things you don't like doing. And a lot of the advice that I give leaders, particularly entrepreneurs and CEOs, is to get rid of the things you don't like doing. The things you do poorly and you don't like doing, you should delegate them to somebody else, because you will find that somebody in life likes doing them. Like I could never be a doctor. I'd be the world's worst doctor. I'd see somebody like, oh man, you're going to die. Looks so bad. Okay. But I'm so grateful that there are doctors who love being doctors. Okay. There are certain parts of business that I don't like, but I know there are people who love them, and I put them in the role. They're like, man, I'm so glad I don't have your job, Dave, but I love my job here. So there's somebody who can do it and they'll like it, but we do have to do the things we don't feel like doing. And oftentimes we do like them, and they're not even the things we don't want to do. So just take a look at your personal life. You might like working out. You certainly would want to be kind to your family and your friends. But on this particular day, you don't feel like working out. You don't feel like saving money, even though you want to be wealthy. On this particular day, you're crabby, you're tired, you haven't had your coffee, you're hungry, and you don't feel like being nice. But somebody were to ask in an overall sense, do you want to be nice to your family? Do you like being nice? Yeah, I like that. But today I don't feel like it. And that happens because we're human beings. So that's when we overcome ourselves, is to do the things that we don't feel like doing. And I think it becomes a little hopeless to people if we say to them, the key to success is doing what you don't like doing. I actually think the key to success is delegating the things I don't like doing. Now, sometimes you can't delegate them. Sometimes you both don't like doing them and you don't feel like doing them. But in the short term, you need to do both. And that's okay. As long as you don't feel like I will forever have to do this thing I don't like. See, that's why people quit things. And if you put somebody into a job or a role and you say, I know you don't like this part, but just do it anyway. Well, there's a certain part of every job that necessarily we don't always like. People romanticize athletes and sometimes, actors and sometimes entrepreneurs and CEOs too. But we all have seen things that we, to a certain degree, don't like. The entrepreneur has power, though. The power they have is to eventually delegate that and to do the things that they need to do, they like to do, they want to do that, but sometimes they just don't feel like doing.
Oh, I like that distinction. Thank you for clarifying that, because it's really important, and language is important, right? I had heard it as do the things you don't like. No, it's do the things you don't feel like doing, even when you don't feel like doing it. If they've got to get done, they've got to get done. And that's really the key. Do the things that have to get done, whether you feel like doing them or not, and then delegate those things that you don't like doing. And I absolutely agree with that, because in the work that I do with teams, I say, hey, look, I am not the most organized person in the world. I am not a by the book, follow the process, but I know that processes and systems are important to my business. So I have someone on my team who just loves creating structure and following those things, and will follow up with me to make sure that I get those things done. And I think that's what you're talking about. Earlier, Dave, you talked about, what I like to, a lot of people call it the hero's journey. Our life is full of ups and downs. And as I've, read more and more about you, you've had some serious adversity in your life, and then you've come back from it. And then you've had other adversity in your life, and then you've come back from it. You're really in this. What is keeping you going? I mean, with all the success you've had, Dave Durand could really just, come back. You could get really good at golf and play golf probably every day, and sit back and do nothing that gives back to society. But you are doing something. You're inspiring people. You're helping young entrepreneurs, or even older entrepreneurs like myself, who are starting new ventures, figure things out so they can scale. What's driving you to that? What in all those failures that you have, and you've had some serious setbacks in your life, what is it there that made you come back? And then what's driving you today?
Yeah, I like this question. So a lot of people say things that I think they think are palatable and politically correct. But this is a very intimate question. For me, it's just very simple. I want to go to heaven. And when I meet Jesus, I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. I don't want him to ask me why I buried talents. So I have a lot left in the toolbox and a lot left in my battery packs. And it's too early for me to get lazy. My kids are all out of the house. I'll be 55 in a couple of days. I'm a grandfather now. I've sold my businesses, so I could sit tight and just hang out. But at the same time, I think that would be completely dissatisfying. There's just so much more to learn. I remember speaking, you talk about MMA, watching Randy Couture. Do you remember Randy Couture?
Oh, yeah.
Is? Okay.
Yes.
So Randy, this goes back to when he was fighting Brock Lesnar. Do you remember that?
Oh,
Brock
yes.
Lesnar's hand was a little bit bigger than twice the size of my body. I mean, the guy was just a massive piece of just muscle. And Randy was way smaller than that. And I think Randy was 44 or 45 at the time that he fought fought Brock the second time or whatever. And I won one time, I think, and lost. I don't remember this because this goes back 15 years or whatever. But I remember he was 44, 45, and they said, why do you keep going? And are you going to keep going? He goes, oh, yeah, I still keep improving. So as long as I'm improving, I'm just going to keep going. And I remember at the time, so I'm 15, I was like 40. It's like, I think I'm 5 years younger than him. I don't know if you get these numbers exactly right. But I remember thinking, oh, my gosh, this guy is still improving. And that's why he wants to do that. At this age, he's still getting better? Are you kidding me? George Foreman inspired me that way, too, when he was 50 years old and he was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. I think he unified all the belts at that age, something like that. So, well, our bodies can physically start to diminish over a period of time. Now, we can stay in optimal health for very long, longer than most people think, but our minds can really go for a long period of time. If we take care of our bodies, we take care of our minds, we can keep learning until the day that we die. We can keep improving until the day we die. And there's nothing worse than a person who amasses a lot of time and experience or overcomes challenges in life, and they just keep that between their own ears. There's so many people going through struggles, and oftentimes it's just hearing that somebody else went through a struggle that was like that or worse than that or similar to that. And that when they hear that story, they say, wow, you know what? If you can do it, I can do it. And the other thing too is interesting, and I learned this when I was young. I had a guy who was just not doing very good in business. I met with him one time, gave him a few thoughts and advice. And he asked me, should I do something? And I said, yes. I didn't remember the conversation. Now I remember people when I interact with them. I just talked to a lot of people. So I have a tendency to not replay too many of those conversations when it comes to my portion of it. I think of the person, but not necessarily my portion of it. So it's maybe 4 years later, and he had a really big success. And he called me up and he said, I just want to tell you that I've had this success. And I wanted to thank you. And I had no idea why he wanted to thank me. I said, for what? And he goes, well, the reason I did it is you told me I should do it. I didn't remember that. But he said, you told me I should do it. You said, my name. And he said, I think you should do this. And then he went and did it. That taught me a lot. The reason it taught me a lot is because there was something that was a big decision for him in life that made a difference in life. And I didn't remember the conversation. Mm-hmm. But because I told him to do it, he did it. The weight of our words really matters. And if you do something and you have a certain amount of results, and now you encourage somebody else, there's a more weight behind that enthusiasm and encouragement, you can do some really good things out there in life. And I know there have been many people in my life who've done that for me. And I'm grateful for them as well.
It's really great. And I love the way you said that, because often we don't realize the impact we can have on someone with our words, with a word of encouragement. And I want to use that with my wife. I don't remember my part of it. I'm going to say, I remember what you were thinking, but I forgot about my part of it. So I don't get in trouble for those conversations that I forget sometimes, yeah. Dave. But no, that's really, really important. I've coached track and cross country. I have a 12-year-old daughter that runs track and cross country, but I have a 34-year-old daughter also. And her classmates, I often run into them and they're like, I remember this that you told me, in sixth grade. And I'm like, no, I don't remember. So I'm familiar with that feeling, but sometimes it'll have an impact on people. You mentioned something when we went back to the things that you've learned throughout life. And you mentioned the fact that you want to go to heaven. And mm-hmm. One of the things that I want to make sure we talk about, you're really good about talking about your faith openly. You don't hide it. You don't shy away from it, but you also don't shove it in people's faces. So there's a really great balance that you have, because it makes people, I think nobody would say it after watching you and listening to you, that say, oh gosh, he's just a faith guy and he's going to put it on your face. No, you actually show some real world ways that you can use that power of your faith to be successful. How do you, I know it plays a big part in your business and in your life. How do you keep it center stage? And how do you make sure that the people you work with are a fit for that?
Well, I think, first of all, my organizations are very diverse. I mean, the very, and by the way, I'm not a DEI guy, If you want a diverse organization, I'll tell you how you have it. You do one thing. You set out to find the best people for the role, and you're going to find them everywhere. If you set out for diversity, you're just going to divide your organization. But if you set out to find the best people everywhere and you look around, you're going to go, wow, this is amazing. We're quite different. Why? Because you're going to find great people everywhere. And so the very thing that people claim to want when they want diversity, they usually don't get when they seek diversity. There's just a bunch of division. But if you're not seeking diversity and you're just seeking to have the best people in your organization, the best role, the most qualified, you end up getting diversity, which is like really cool. And nobody questions why they're there, which is also great. But the reason I say that is because I don't, by any stretch of the imagination, require nor ask people about or talk much about my faith in the workplace. I just go about the work. I do the work. But I know that for me, I'm a sinner and I need a savior. And I have to spend way more time judging myself than I do others. And if I can hold myself to the standard that I've been commanded by the Bible, which is to be perfect, I'm going to fail every day at it, but I'm going to keep giving it a shot. And what I have found is that good people come from all walks of life. And really good people have an attraction to other people who have strong convictions, even if they're not the same convictions, as long as those convictions are rooted sincerely into what that person believes is true. When a person has convictions in something they know is a lie, nobody really respects that. So I've found that it's actually very well received. There's a lot of people, I think, who would say, you know, if I'm going to be open about my faith in the workplace, people are going to be closed-minded about that. Well, I think, yeah, if you're confusing the workplace with a place where you're supposed to be, evangelizing with words on a daily basis, as opposed to evangelizing with the fact that you want to do high quality work and you want to serve other people with what you're doing. And that makes people say, hey, what's behind that? I think that's a pretty powerful way to do it.
You know, the other thing I want to make sure that we bring up, Dave, is you brought it up earlier, the 48 laws, Robert Greene, and I love one of the episodes you said, you know, they're not laws, they're just ideas that he had, but he called it the 48 laws. But what I really liked about you delving into that is you don't necessarily agree with all of those laws. As a matter of fact, a lot of them you're saying, hey, this is a stupid law, but here's something good. And so because it gained so much popularity, you're delving into it. And by the way, listeners, go to davedurand.com, go follow him on YouTube, and you can see these really short episodes on the 48 Laws by Robert Greene, and just get Dave's take on it, because I think it's really good. But one of the things that I love in the introduction to that is you took something that you quite didn't so much agree with, but you knew it was popular and needed to be addressed. And you said, okay, let's find what good we can find. And even in those laws that you say, wow, this one's really bad, like never outshine the master, is a really bad law, because you should try to outshine the master. And then I think what you said is, if the master is allowing you to outshine him, then that's someone worth following. Right. If they're going to try to put you back into your cage and don't outshine me, then it's probably not somebody worth following. But you did that it was very intentional, taking a book that you didn't agree with all of it. And I think it speaks to your diversity, right? It's look, let's take someone who I really don't agree with. They're giving perhaps some bad advice that turns people into tyrants, and let's find the good in it. And you're about what, the 6th lesson right now, 7th or 8th lesson?
Yeah, I actually just produced 8, 9, and 10 today. A little teaser on that. 8, I gave a thumbs sideways and a thumbs down. And 9 and 10, I give enthusiastic thumbs up. But I do provide some clarification on a few of them. So, you know, one of the things, Dan, I love this, is I do really enjoy working with people that have a different point of view than me. Because you learn a lot from people that have a different point of view. The one thing that I don't like to do is to work with people who are unsincere. A sincere person, like somebody says, what's the greatest sign of strength in a human being? It's the desire for what's true. Now, that doesn't mean that we all come to the same conclusion. And the reason we don't all come to the same conclusion is some of us are wrong, because you can't have two things that oppose each other and have them be true. You can have paradoxes. Those are things that appear to oppose each other, but they don't actually. But you can't have, the law of non-contradiction is a real law. That's not one of the fake 48 laws of power. It's an actual law. and you can't have that. But we go through our path in different ways. And here's the thing that I usually tell people: listen, for most of us, if I was that person, raised like they were, in the place that they were, in the same way that they were, with the same experiences that they are, I would probably think very much the same way. So what is it that I have that I can introduce them to? Or what is it that they have that they can introduce me to in order for me to see things differently? And when we start to see things differently, because of that, we start to do really, really, really good things. But that's all contingent upon the idea that no matter where we're coming from, if we're coming from people from here or there or wherever, we are all interested in what is true. As soon as a person says, I don't care what is true, I'm just trying to, manipulate others to do, I'm justifying my own existence. And so therefore I'm willing to bend realities into my own truth. Like, nothing is dumber than the words, my truth. Nobody owns the truth. 2 + 2 is 4. That's not my truth or your truth. And even if I said to you, I like tomatoes, you can't say Dave Durand doesn't like tomatoes. That's my truth. You'd be wrong. It's not your truth. It's wrong. The fact is Dave Durand likes tomatoes. End of story. That's the truth. Any version outside of that is false. And you can't just will it to be because you said it. And people, they believe this silliness. Don't put them ever at the adult table. I'm telling you, if you ever meet somebody like that, just don't work with them. Because that is the type of error that will find its way into your accounting books, into your customer service program, into your HR program. And if a person doesn't realize the most basic principle that facts are facts and truth is truth, then they're not ready to sit at the adult table.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a version of something I like to say. We have to assume that people are doing the best they can, given the resources they have, the way they were brought up, given the information they have. And if they're doing their absolute best, and I think that's a great distinction that you just made, when they start believing, if they're not doing their absolute best, then they're trying to just take shortcuts or doing it a different way or tell some untruths, right? No, Dave Durand doesn't like tomatoes. No, I told you I like tomatoes. You can't just make up the opposite truth. That is a fantastic, really, I like that analogy. So Dave, who are your influences as we look, and we're looking to wrap up here? You're obviously a great inspiration to a lot of people. You've led a lot of leaders. Who are the influences that influenced you to take the path that you've taken?
Well, I have great parents and fantastic mentors in my life when I was young. Even as a man in my 30s and 40s, a great gentleman, Jose Delgado, he recently passed away, is a great mentor. But also I've been influenced by, a lot of the Catholic saints and the way they live their lives. And then influenced too by other just really great minds in business that think very, very strategically. They're very good at what they do when they lead. And so there's no shortage of people in my life who I admire. In fact, I have a tendency to want to admire most things about people, including the people that I am different than. And I also am aware that while I have a great affinity for mentors and people and colleagues who are interested in the truth, that all of us at sometimes believe things that aren't true. And we think they're true. And we even share them that way. The reason that's important is because the mentors in my life that have helped me the most are the ones who can say, I was wrong about that. And wow, you learn a lot from a person who has conviction in things, but is able to show you the evolution of their thought. Because all of our thought needs to evolve or deepen. And that I think makes a great mentor.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dave. And as you've talked, I've written down like 20 more questions I want to ask you, and I'm already a few minutes over on the time that I want to have for the show. So I'm gonna say this: I would love to have you back another time. And as Leading Giants continues to grow, as your workshops continue to grow. By the way, where can people find out about your the Scale to Freedom seminar that you've got coming up? I think it's months away still, so we've still got some time. But let's close with that so we can let people know. And of course, follow you on davedurand.com, follow you on YouTube, you're on LinkedIn. But tell us about that seminar so we can leave with a call to action here.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, it's in order to free yourself, to have the financial freedoms, to have the scaling freedom that you'd like, you have to be able to think differently about your organization to scale it. And I always show people that, going from 0 to $1 million is the hardest million. From $1 million to 10 million is a challenge, but not as hard. And from 10 million to 100 million that's the easiest thing I've ever done when I've scaled a business. And one of the reasons for it is because, you're 10xing every time. To go from 100,000 to $1 million, so that's just 10x. And then you just 10x again. And then you 10x again. And the interesting thing about that is that now you have systems in place. So you know how to do a little bit better. But you have to go through those right early on. So we show people, whether they're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, whether they have a smaller business or they just want to go into business, how to free themselves from the beginning. Especially that solopreneur. They get trapped. They think, oh, you know what? I have to leave, stop working for the man, so I have all my freedoms. Only to find out that now they're the marketing person, the salesperson, the financial person, the production person, and the janitor working 7 days a week. They have no freedom. And if they stay in that too long with the false beliefs that nobody else can do anything that they do, they can find themselves in there for a decade or two and they can lose their life. So I like to get them right away, free them from that prison to help to go to it. But by the way, it's at leadinggiants.com. That's where you can find that. And I appreciate being on today, Dan. You've done a fantastic job, and I wish you well with your show.
Thank you so much, Dave. Why don't we leave on? Why don't we end the show on that note?
Yeah. Why not? Why not? Lead different.
Thank you so much, Dave. And I look forward to continuing to talk with you. Thank you for being on the show, guys. We're going to air this soon, and we're going to have a great premiere with Dave. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next week on the Lead Different podcast.
Lead different because great leaders change the world.